Oh man, Friday is here again. TGIF. I love that sometimes that doesn't mean much to me. I see clients this weekend, but it still does mean something to me, which is like, okay, it's Friday. I don't have to go as long today, and I can maybe do some things that are a little bit less worky, right? So I also think that this is a great time to talk about the holidays, even because the holidays have not really like started yet. For some people, they have. I've got a neighbor who was like on point with the holiday decorations already. They transitioned from Halloween to Christmas like that. I am actually kind of enjoying it. But what I wanted to really dive into to just kind of open the conversation, because between now, November 10th, or just November to December and January, is that there's this like perpetual amount of time where people start to really have a hard time. Now, if you work in the mental health field, this is a pretty much a continuous conversation that we have, is that the holidays are a hard time for people with mental health issues, because a lot of mental health is influenced by family and gatherings and community. And I think other communities have done a really good job with being able to open up, and there are spaces for other people to feel included if they don't have a family of origin that is healthy for them to be around. But at the same time, that doesn't stop people from feeling a certain way about having to either deal with their family and just not seeing their family, or any other those very specific situations that people go through, and that affects their mental health. It affects their mental stability, their well-being, and that ultimately influences how people can gain that momentum in life about how they change their lives. How do they work on and prioritize their mental health? Okay, so I'm going to do and kind of consolidate this as best as possible for people, because I really, I've been talked with a diverse group of people, whether that be the environment that I was in, whether in my private practice, I have, just different types of people from different roles. And there's been some undertones, some similarities between a lot of these people that I really thought would be, important to highlight. So, but I'm going to say that this is going to be, it's going to be a multiple part kind of live, right? I think today, the reason why holidays, I was like, okay, let's start now, is because we have a holiday that's not really considered like the holidays coming up, which is Veterans Day. Excuse me. I had some commotion. Veterans Day, which I believe is the 11th, or it's the Monday after the 11th. And that in itself is a holiday that a lot of people don't really consider how that affects mental health. Without going too deep into this, the relationship between military and civilian life is a lot of where mental health issues stem from. But I go into that in a whole different part of like my workshops and stuff like that. And maybe I'll do that on like, what's it like to be the family member or growing up with a family member who is active duty military, and what kind of influence that their mental health has on our mental health. So the veteran population is a huge holiday that we probably, as a society, like if you're trying to be pro mental health and improve like your trauma footprint, you're trying to improve your own mental health, you're also trying to go into that longevity mode of investment of like, okay, how is what I do going to impact the greater good? Being able to understand that Veterans Day is such an active holiday where mental health is such a variable. You've got some people, whether it's the actual veterans population of people who are having trouble with post-traumatic stress disorder or some degree of mental health just by being exposed to certain lifestyles in being a military person. Or if you have someone who's still active duty, I have so shout out to my brother. I hope he's okay with that. But he's not as much in infantry anymore, but he is still in the military, and he has to deal with a whole lot of exposure to trauma and to military people. So whenever I'm around him, ultimately I now share the exposure just as much, or if not more, if I'm not unaware that just by being around this person in a happy, good mood, does that affect me? because if they're going through something, I'm naturally going to be exposed to it. So if we don't consider Veterans Day to be like a consideration to what a holiday is, it's a federal holiday. It's not one that we wear red and like, have certain icons for other than the American flag and thanking people for their service. But sometimes thanking people for their service in themselves can be a trigger to their mental health. So something I suggest that you just be considerate is, one, everything that we just said. But if you're wanting to thank a veteran for their service, just the acknowledgement of, and you ask them like, hey, how do you celebrate Veterans Day? How do you appreciate being honored this? Because if you think about it this way, this was, sorry, kind of hopefully not a tangent, but when my father passed away, the chronic thing that people said to me was like, oh, I'm so sorry. What the hell do I say to that? I'm like, oh, thank you. And I can affirm them. If I'm people pleasing, I'd be like, yes, I appreciate and I thank you for your condolences. But what do you say to that? Like if someone says thank you for your service and thank you for being completely traumatized in the pursuit of peace, which it's not a completely peaceful time right now. What kind of position does that put people in to be receiving that thanks? Now, I'm not saying like, for anyone who takes offense, you're not doing it wrong, but I'm just asking you to consider doing it differently. Asking the veteran, be like, oh, hey, if you find someone as a veteran, be like, oh, thank you. Like, how do you celebrate Veterans Day? How do you appreciate being, appreciated on this day? And be individualized with it. Be appreciative of, their service by asking them and giving them some autonomy in how they want to be celebrated. Okay. So, but if I were to expand this, so that's just kind of like where I started with Veterans Day, because that's where I was like, oh, shoot, like the holidays are literally right around the corner. So then my mental health brain and clinician brain was like, okay, we gotta be at least a little bit preparatory here. We have Thanksgiving in like less than 2 weeks. I think it's literally 2 weeks yesterday. And then we've got Christmas, then we got New Year's, and then we got this hubbub of like, oh my gosh, I need to get my New Year's resolutions and all these like attachments to when change can actually happen. So being the preventative type of person that I and clinician that I want to be, I'm putting out there. So I'm going to first start is that the family side and the prep work that we have to do to deal with the family members that we have to be around, I'm actually going to turn that into a workshop. So I'm going to make and it's a free workshop. Let me just put that out there. I decided to make myself available in terms of a strategizing for people who are, about to, like, they know they're going to have to be around people. It's going to be a tough time. Or they just want to try to do something different, whether that be with like your eating habits or whether that be with communication and boundaries with family. So I'm going to have 2 opportunities this Monday and next Monday, which is before Thanksgiving, it's a virtual workshop where you guys can come in. I'm going to have a little bit of structure, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty open flow strategizing session about how do you deal with the intricacies of having a whole lot of people or not a lot of people and then a lot of focus on you and having healthy boundaries, the prep work that goes behind, the communication strategies to set boundaries, or really it's just kind of the preparation plan for yourself to have consideration to how much stress that the holidays can be for you. Because most of the time, this is what I see with most of my clients, and I also see with myself, is that we are go, 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 go. We know Thanksgiving, like, oh, Thanksgiving's in 2 weeks. Cool, I get a break then. It's almost like we ramp up. It's because we're trying to finish work. We're trying to take some days off. We're trying to fit so much into this period of time where we're overusing our energy. And then we ultimately, when we are like, oh, I'm finally at mom's house, or I'm finally at my cousin's house. I'm finally where I need to be. Hey, maybe you're taking a vacation this holiday. Good for you. But if you still have that, like, what happens internally, and this is not necessarily directly like mental health, but it is directly, is that your immune system is one of the first things to become compromised during this time, is because you use all your energy on the like preparation in one way of how you prepare for the holidays, how you just get your work done, how you just get some to the next place of where you're going to take a break, and then you collapse. And your body's like, oh my God, thank God we took a break. And everything takes a break, including your immune system. And then sickness and illness moves in. And then you start eating more sugar. And then you start drinking more. And then you start doing all these things that just damage and throw, literally, like it's like a grease fire. You may not see it because it's all happening internally, but you are going to feel it. You're going to feel it in your mood because you're going to be like, why am I so tired? You're going to oversleep at that point. So you'll likely throw off any healthy routine that you have. You're going to see like an increase in heartburn usually, because we all know like going for the Tums and the Prilosec is a very common thing because we give ourselves an excuse to be like, here's all this food, let me overeat. Whereas you compromise everything long-term for yourself in this very short period of time. Very short. And I've done it myself. I've already started seeing, like, I guess my holiday is going to be a little different just because my brother is out of town. And when you're in the military, you don't really know where they are, right? So that Thanksgiving is probably not going to be something that is like centrally located in one space, which kind of helps me a little bit just because I don't have as much pressure to get to, a family member's house. I don't have to do, travel. There was talk about it, but right. So that's also just my lifestyle. I also live this lifestyle, which is why I'm sitting here having some credibility towards offering you this consideration. But one of the biggest things, okay, so I'm going to start with this one, right? If this is your permission to not go, then take it for that. However, but when you block yourself off from a setting of going and be like, okay, I really, if that's what's best for you, then don't go. But what I'd encourage you to be prepared for on the back end is that strategy of like, it's going to disrupt people. There's people who want to see you, regardless of whether you don't feel up to it or if you're struggling with depression, anxiety, there's still going to be a consequence that could potentially make you feel worse once you met it. It's just delayed at this point, right? Because then there's Christmas and then there's the phone call after the holidays. They're like, oh, well, I missed you at Thanksgiving. Where are you at? And if you are not prepared for yourself, not for anyone else, but for yourself to have that conversation, you might as well have just gone and endured the stress and the energy suck that being present in that environment likely was going to be. So that would be my first thing. So if you don't need to go, don't go. Like if you really need to be by yourself for this holiday, do that. But I would also encourage you on the back end to be very aware of what's going on internally about like, oh, my mom's going to guilt me or my aunt's going to call me out, or I don't know, everyone's family members are different. But if you're dealing with guilt, that, my friends, is going to take more energy out of you, like over the long term. That's emotional embezzlement is what I call it with my clients. Guilt and shame is emotional embezzlement because it's slowly taking small bits and pieces of your emotional energy away from you when you don't even realize it, because your brain, you've already trained your brain to be like so focused on not feeling. I'm not doing anything because I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel negative emotions. You won't feel them, but it doesn't mean that they're not happening. Okay. So where I see a lot of people, I don't really believe in true right or wrong when it comes to improvement of your mental health, but this is where I would say where they go wrong is they think that if I'm going to avoid the family, if I'm going to avoid guilt, then let me just not go. And I'm like, I'm sorry to inform you of this, but your brain is still on. Your brain is still playing out the script of what it is that you're anticipating. And if you guys have been watching any of my videos, I strongly go back and I talk a lot about this mode that we get in. That's what's anticipation versus preparation. More than likely, we're always going to identify anticipation first. Anticipation's worry. Anticipation is rumination, racing thoughts, restlessness, can't get to sleep. That is all anticipation mode activated. And so we have to start in anticipation mode. But if you don't know how to get back into preparation mode would be you recognizing, okay, I'm worrying again. Calm your body, because it's most likely coming from conditioned responses somatically, and then or you're thinking about something and then it's causing what's the word I'm trying to use? Unrest, not disrest. it's not a word, the unrest physically that, and then if you have any type of pain disorder like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue that you struggle with, or you just have any chronic health issues, you're creating more of turbulence over time. And actually probably not. And when I say over time, we're talking very short term at this point. You see an increase in people's self-medicating around this time as well, not only just because of emotional distress and toxic family systems, but really just because it's chronic exposure to your own trauma that builds these diseases that we now deal with, the chronic pain issues. And of course my brain is like, no, you don't have to give examples when you're live. So I already mentioned fibromyalgia. Restless leg syndrome is an often one. Heartburn, as much as like you guys, I thought it was normal for such a long time. It's really literally inflammation. It is a lot of your body just screaming at you, and medicating yourself for it versus preventing it, very two different things. But if you're having any of these particular ailments, there's fairly simple solutions. Just as it has like heartburn, peppermint is a really good holistic way to like, it's just going to treat it versus putting a medication in your body, just in case if anyone having that problem. But really it's the amount of sugar buildup. And like so for me, I love sugar. I love to eat the cakes and the pastries during this time. So more than likely I start to feel that, like, I call it sour stomach because it's like, I kind of feel, but it is heartburn. It is acid buildup from the heating up of sugar in your system, and then it causes stuff, right? So what do you do to distract yourself from it? Probably a drink. Guess what alcohol is? It's more sugar on the fire. So I say all that to say, number one is if you need permission not to go, then don't go, but also be prepared on the back end to address the internal inflammation that you're still going to deal with, which is your emotions, guilt, shame. And then if you do need a strategy session, this Monday coming up, so it's at the 13th and the 20th in the evening, I'm going to host an individual workshop and kind of prep and strategy series for family interactions. So we can go over and do some of the practice work prior to, so then that way you have a better chance of actually being effective with whether you've already been trying to set boundaries with your family or just continuously practicing as well. The other thing here too is I want you guys to be aware of your buffers. So this is common with people who are married, single people with alcohol, or they bring their friends home with them to the holiday. These types of buffers, although helpful in this regard of like, oh, well, it's going to keep me distracted. It's going to keep me, engaged and not have to be at the prey of like these people that I have to deal with in my family, right? What I want you to realize is that they're not that much protecting you from what it is that you're trying to avoid. Okay, so let's put it in the sense. So let's start with the friend. The friend that doesn't have anyone to go home with, like, they don't have much family, or they're like, cross country. They don't have the situation to go back to their family, and you invite them to your family. This is a new fish in new waters. Okay, now it takes a lot. Now, I assume a lot of people have some social anxiety that they just haven't discovered, and if they're masking it, that's one thing. But so I go ahead and assume that most people have a social anxiety, because most of the people I talk to, they're like, oh my gosh, what do I say? I don't want to be inappropriate. They're in automatic people pleasing mode, which is putting them in a really already precarious situation to not be true to themselves. Now, you do not necessarily have to be responsible for all of that if you invite your friend home, but if they're going through it, you're going to go through it. So it actually does make you having to do more. And, whether it's, you want to call it hostessing and being hospitable, whether you want to call it people pleasing, you are going to ultimately have to be more responsible when you bring someone home to accommodate their needs. And that puts you in a very precarious situation as well if you do not have a plan. So these buffers really, just, it doesn't mean that don't do them, just be prepared that when you invite someone to your home, they don't know anyone. They could be nervous. You don't know what they're going to do when they're nervous, right? And do you have an understanding of who they are enough to bring them into your family? Do you know your family well enough and how they're going to treat this person? Most likely we do, but just something to be considerate if you are the person inviting someone, or if you have someone, or if you're being invited somewhere. Doesn't mean you say no, but just be prepared, because I'm going to talk about the last point of like self-care and self-preparation for these situations, and how you can pretty much the more common points of where we need to pay attention to of how we prepare and not anticipate these really high stress periods of time. Then there's the good old substances, stress, sugar, and drugs and alcohol. So the buffers, those are all the things that really, they base what they're doing. If you're talking about alcohol and most like downers in terms of drugs or alcohol, is that they're delaying your central nervous system. So if you smoke a blunt before you go and you tear up Thanksgiving dinner, is you're now putting a lot more stress on your system in terms of like how much you eat, because we all know when we're like inebriated and have some degree of like less cognizant and availability, we don't have and acknowledge our hunger cues. We just keep going. Or maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I just keep going. If I don't have true consciousness over what and mindfulness over my eating, I'm just going to keep going. Stress is the same thing, because at that point, stress can act as a bias to your brain. And it's like, it's just the thing that makes you feel better. So therefore, binge eating becomes a little bit of an issue. And then it's again starts on this pattern. So, because if you are recovering from binge eating or some degree of like eating disorder, I work very hard pretty much like prior to these holidays with my clients about the prep work in the moment, as well as the aftercare, because it's the aftercare that most people underestimate to be able to get back into a routine, regardless of whether or not you have another holiday meal within 2 days, or whether you have another holiday within a couple of weeks with Christmas. So when you break these periods up, which is why I'm starting at the beginning of November talking about holidays and access to food, is that you or anyone, myself, we're in this preparatory place of what are the things that we're going to start anticipating. So you guys know your family better than anyone else. So you're going to know who does what, how they do it, who's got the tea, who's got the drama. All of that, as fun as it is also disruptful for you paying attention to yourself. So this prep time, if you have goals that you're still trying to accomplish and not completely throw out the window during this time, this is going to be crucial for y'all to just sit down with yourselves. Notice what patterns go on every holiday. Consider if, for me, holidays, since I lost my father, were weird because it's what I think about. So I actually got very intentional around this time of the year, where I take some time to actively and intentionally sit in and make myself consider grief. So because since grief is lifelong, if you haven't caught on to that yet, here to tell you, grief is not a period of time when you lose something. It expands and spans the whole course of your life, because you didn't lose that person for the first 2 months of them being gone. You lost them from the rest of your life. So, or you lost that item. Now, not all grief is created equal that way, but when it comes to people, holidays can be really hard in that regard. So, being intentional about knowing like, okay, most holidays I feel this way. When and what's it usually attached to or triggered by, right? And looking at those things and knowing where you have to sometimes mitigate. So all of that in those prep strategy sessions that I do in the next 2 Mondays for y'all, at least before Thanksgiving. I might consider doing some between Thanksgiving and Christmas as well, just because we need some touch-ups. But those particular prep sessions, we can go through a little bit more individually about, okay, what emotions come up? How do you plan for, how do you have behavioral strategies about how to cope with those and to be able to get through these particular days and events without having, if you have to be present, without having too much consequence for you in the long run, okay? So that is really kind of leading more to my third point here, which is having a self-care preparation plan, action plan, and aftercare plan. Yeah, we got a lot of plans around here, okay? So that prep plan, so that was just kind of what I was talking about, and those strategy sessions can help you guys with it in the moment. If you guys can't make it to the strategy sessions, one of the things that I really tell people is use your intimate places intentionally. So your bathroom, your bedrooms, if it's not yours, being somewhere else, being prepared with something that you know is self-soothing, preferably not a substance, because I know people are like, yeah, I need to go smoke a cigarette. Again, we're really trying to reduce the intention of like creating more chaos for ourselves and inflammation for ourselves in the long run. At least that's the type of coach and consultant that I am, right? So if you are in the space, you can, having to remind yourself, and setting a reminder on your phone, be like, hey, take a 5-minute break, whether you think you need one or not. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands. And just because if you're around a lot of people having conversations, that's a lot of energy that you're using that your brain has not registered yet. And before you know it, your battery is like 5% and shutting down like that. Then you brain-wise, you're still functioning. This is where like people use the term functioning alcoholic. It's not. First, no, you're just an alcoholic. You're always going to be functioning, more than likely. You're going to be moving. Your brain and your body can allocate energy from other places to keep things going. It's just not going to be going in the most effective and healthy way. So you're going to be open. You may fall asleep, actually. Your body does shut down, because that's where, and then you got the itis. That's a whole other thing. Excuse me. But what's going to happen is that mindlessness starts to set in. So those goals and those intentions that you're like, oh, I really would like to stay, on course with my physical goals or my financial goals. Because then guess what? It's the biggest shopping day of the year, the next day after you just literally sedated yourself with food. That's not great decision making already. Like overspending, getting ourselves into that financial wellness and that long-term mode is what I work with people on. So it's like, it's the prep work that we have to do. Just like your mom doesn't, just make everything, or whoever, makes Thanksgiving dinner, they just don't make everything the day of. They actually start making things like 2 to 3 days ahead of time so that they can just put it in the oven. If you are working smarter, not harder, that is the process that we're doing, right? So if you are in that place where you're like, yeah, I really want to maintain my goals, my progress, doing and being intentional with the prep work. So if you want to do that on your own, putting it on your schedule to, sit down for 15, 20 minutes, 2 or 3 days before you actually leave, and map out some of your strategies. Or coming to the strategy session that I'm hosting for the next 2 Mondays in the evening. If you need the information, please message me, because I'm going to post something about it, but you have to reach out and ask me the question, and I will get you the information to register for it. I'm probably going to put a cap on how many people there, because I do want to have enough time to help people individually strategize for these more difficult situations about conversations with family. So that like really inappropriate and uncomfortable family member that you have to be around. Just as a heads up, I'm about to say something really controversial. Maybe it's a person that has actually abused you in the past, because there are still very well families out there that have a no, what's that military term? No talk, no tell. Damn, why did I just forget that? You know what I mean? Like, you don't talk about it. Hush, hush. Keep it quiet. So there are families out there that still deny the realities of someone else's abuse, whether that be physical, emotionally, sexual, religious, financial abuse, that the holidays completely like, oh, you just put on a face, you wear your Christmas sweaters, you play your music, and life goes on, and just this person's reality gets completely avoided. So that's what I'm trying to help people understand, is that your reality does not have to be put on the back burner just because other people want to celebrate. And you can also have certain ways of how you validate your own existence in this time if you are going to be around. If you scroll back into the beginning of this talk, though, one of my first recommendations is that if you don't need to go, don't go. Like, if you are prepared, but then you also have to be prepared for the conversations and the boundaries that come with, prioritizing yourself. Because I will give you a heads up, spoiler alert, people are going to be disappointed. in you, and you have to learn that. I'll talk about that in the strategy session, but is that learning how to withstand the guilt, learning how to withstand the disappointment, because that in itself is heavy and it drains us very easily. So I think I hit all my notes there. Really the biggest thing is, you guys, be kind to yourselves, be compassionate. If you do not know what kindness really is, because kindness is not calling yourself an idiot. Kindness is not speaking to yourself the way that you would let other people speak to you, okay? But being compassionate is probably the hardest thing to do around this time, because there is so much like chemical imbalance that goes on. Something to really be mindful about when it comes to mental health is the shift in transition in season. The sunlight, we just had a time change that messed me up too. I was like, wait, why do I feel so tired? Why am I up so early? Like, what the heck? Your vitamin D levels. If anything, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't. This is not medical advice, but taking a vitamin D supplement around this time is more than likely smarter than it is unsafe. But if you definitely want to make sure that you actually need vitamin D supplements right now, go get some labs drawn with your primary care and really look at that could be the cause of your mood instability, just because we're not getting outside and exposed to as much sunlight. People with a lot more melanin than me need more vitamin D than I do. So please do not trick yourself into thinking that just because you don't sunburn very easily does not mean that your vitamin D's levels are not low. Okay. So I know mine are, and I'm like, okay, this is my mental reminder and accountability to go take my vitamin supplement, because if it's literally in the cupboard, and then my attention deficit stuff that I still work on is that if it's not on the counter and it's not right in front of my face, I forget to take it. So I'm gonna go take my supplement too, just because, or, making sure that you get outside first thing in the morning and giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes of direct, non-sunscreen, sun exposure, getting outside in the middle of the day to take a walk. This is where over time those vitamin D levels will come back, but exposure to light or a vitamin D supplement, please consider doing that, because that will provide as more stability than you'll even know. Okay. So I will be posting here soon, but if whoever is watching those holiday strategy sessions for those tricky family members, setting very effective boundaries that are short term, because boundaries are ever evolving. But if you guys need help with constructing that awareness for this holiday prep, I will be holding a free workshop for the next 2 Monday evenings to give people some chance to kind of put it on your schedule, make time for yourself, and do the prep work for the holidays. I figured it just kind of came to me. I think it was is it yesterday? Literally, it was very short notice. I think I was driving back from, I've been out of town most of the week, attending to other people's business. And I was like, yo, the holidays are coming up. What am I going to talk about on this live? And I was like, you know what? This is too much to talk about on a live. I need more time. So I was like, I'm going to make myself, my holiday gift to y'all, right, is giving you guys my time for the next 2 Mondays to go through and segment some of the preparation plan, action plan, and the aftercare plan of how you have to deal with, whether it's toxic family members, whether you just have to deal with yourself, and how you endure that and you prepare those narratives and to set those boundaries for yourself and for other people. Okay. So that is the first segment of holidays and mental health. I hope you guys, if you do come across a veteran, please consider asking them how they want to be honored. And I mean, you can thank them for your service, but just as another suggestion on how you go about that. And I will see you guys next Friday for maybe another holiday in the mental health talk. So have a good day.